Hi, if you just joined us, welcome to our IELTS Facebook live session. I'm here with Pete Jones from freeieltscourse.com, who's been helping IELTS candidates prepare for the test for well over 10 years. He's here to talk to you about how to manage your time in the IELTS writing and speaking tests. So,
hello. Yes, good evening. Or good morning if you're in the other part of the world to me. So I'm in Auckland, New Zealand, so it's 10:30 p.m. at night. And so I know for a lot of you it's going to be the afternoon or the morning. So hello, wherever you are.
Well, we're not gonna start straight away. We're gonna have a little bit of a chat for at the moment, so that we can we've got to allow people to come and join us. And I can see that we've got more and more people joining us at the moment. Hello to those of you who are just joining us, whether it's the morning or the afternoon for you. As I said before, I'm here with Pete Jones. Say hi, Pete.
Hey, hello everybody.
He's an IELTS specialist, and he's here to talk to you about how to manage your time in the IELTS writing and speaking tests. So I have with me as well Liz, whom you can't see. She's on the other side of the camera, and she's going to let us know when would be a good time for us to get going. So where are you speaking from, Pete?
So yeah, I'm calling, speaking from Auckland. In the middle of the city, and it's 10:30 at night. And I'm originally from the UK, but I've been out in New Zealand since 2003, and working with IELTS candidates over that time, online and in the classroom as well. So yeah, helping IELTS candidates from around the world improve their band scores and ultimately move on to going to university or immigrating to another country or getting a better job.
Well, in our last Facebook Live event, we've had people listening from all over the world. So today, why don't you comment? Well, if you're listening to us today from wherever you are, can you comment to say where you're tuning in from? Tuning in, that's just such an old-fashioned word. Nobody tunes in anymore, do they? Because we don't tune in anymore. So in the last...
I saw someone's watching there from Costa Rica in the middle of the night, I think.
Oh, wow. That's dedication.
Yeah.
I still have my lanyard on. Okay. Wow. So, I think that's about the same as we had last time. So we had people watching from the Middle East and Europe, South America, Australasia. So, let's see which other countries are going to be represented today. Hello, if you've joined us. I'm here with Pete Jones. As you can see, he's an IELTS specialist, and he's going to be talking today about how to manage your time in the IELTS writing and speaking tests. And if you're taking your test very soon, good luck. And we hope this session really, really helps you. So Pete, while we're waiting for other people to join us, can you tell us what is the question you get asked the most? What tip, what is the big question that you get asked the most?
I think it's that probably, have I got any tips for IELTS, or what is my best tip for IELTS? And my answer to have I got any tips for IELTS is yes I do, and I'll be sharing some of them over the next half an hour or so. In terms of the best tip, it really depends on the one that can make the difference to somebody's band score, and that can be quite individual. If someone's struggling with managing their time in the IELTS writing test, for example, one of the tips that I'm going to give tonight might make a real difference to them, and it might help them get the band score they need. But for other students, it might be related to other aspects of their performance in the IELTS test. It might be a common mistake that they make that they're not aware of, or yeah, it could be a whole host of different things. So the best tip is really quite individual, and it's the one that can make the biggest difference to any one person.
So you're going to give us at least 5 big tips in this session that we're going to do, aren't you? So
I'm going to give
yeah.
5 tips for the IELTS writing test, for how to manage your time in the IELTS writing test, and then 4 tips for how to manage your time in the IELTS speaking test.
Okay, so if you've just joined us, Pete Jones, he's an IELTS specialist. That's him on the screen there. He's going to be giving his top tips on how to manage your time in the writing and speaking tests of the IELTS test. So I think we've got quite a number of people joining us now, so I think it's about time to hand over to Pete. Now I'm going to come off the screen completely, and so you ready?
Yep.
Right, so I'm just going to show that. So that's where we are, and over to you, Pete.
So yeah, good evening, or good afternoon, or good morning, depending where you are. My name's Pete Jones, and I'm going to be giving you some tips on how to manage your time in the IELTS writing and speaking tests. And we're going to start with IELTS writing. And while I'm talking, if you have any questions related to what I'm saying, please post them in the comments, and SJ will ask me some of those questions a bit later in the session if I haven't already answered them. So let's get started with IELTS writing. And for those of you who have done an IELTS writing test, what I'm going to say now is just a reminder, but for those of you who haven't, the IELTS writing test comes in 2 different types. There's the IELTS academic writing test and the IELTS general training writing test. In both writing tests, there are 2 tasks, and you have 60 minutes to complete both tasks. In the IELTS general training test, task 1 is a letter, and task 2 is an essay. And in the IELTS academic writing test, task 1, you have to summarize the information in a graph, chart, table, diagram, or more than one of those. And task 2 is an essay, like in the IELTS general training test. And if you've taken an IELTS writing test or done a practice test, you'll know at least one thing, that it can be quite difficult to write, to complete both tasks in the 1 hour that you're given. And so the tips that I'm going to give you now are going to help you manage your time so that you have a better chance of finishing the tasks, or a better chance of writing better answers within that time. Maybe you already can finish those tasks in 1 hour, but the tips I'll give you will help you improve your writing within that time. So let's start with tip 1. And my first tip is to have a plan before you start the writing test. And your plan should really answer the questions, which task you're going to start with, task 1 or task 2, the time that you're going to spend on each task. The recommended time is 20 minutes for task 1 and 40 minutes for task 2. How you're going to use your time on each task. For example, how long are you going to spend looking at the question and planning your answer before you start writing? How much time do you want to leave to check your writing once you've finished? And you should also plan exactly what you're going to look for in your writing when you're checking it when you've finished, so that you have a very focused list of things that you're going to look for. The reason why it's important to have a plan is if you don't, you're going to waste time in the test thinking about what to do first, what to do second, what to do third. And that time is very valuable. You really need to be confident about what you're going to do as soon as you're allowed to start the writing test. And the next tips focus on some of those points I mentioned in the plan. And tip 2 is about which task to start with. And I suggest that you start with the task that's easiest for you. Now, you may already know that you find task 1 or task 2 easier, and so that's the task you should start with. But if you don't know, or if it really depends on the topic of each task, I suggest that when you start the writing test, you look at both tasks very quickly and think about which one you're most confident with and start with that one. And I mean a quick look, so only a maximum of 1 minute for looking at the 2 tasks, and then you really need to make a decision about where to start. The benefit of doing this, of starting with the easiest task, is that you're more likely to finish it in the right amount of time, and giving you enough time for the second task. If you start with the task that's more difficult, it may take you longer than you think. You may lose some confidence, and this is going to put more pressure on you when you come to do the second task, and you may have a lot less time than you want. Another benefit of looking at both tasks first is when you decide which task to start with, and you are doing that task, at some level your brain is processing the information in the other task. And when you come to start it, you may find that it's easier to think of ideas, or it's easier to think about how to organize your ideas clearly. It's a technique that I've used before in exams, and it really works. It can be very useful and save you time thinking about what to write. My third tip is don't count every word that you write. As you probably know, in writing task 1, you have to write a minimum of 150 words. And in writing task 2, you have to write a minimum of 250 words. Now, if you count every word that you write to check if you've written enough, this takes up valuable time. It's much quicker if you count the number of words in a few random lines, take the average of those number of words, and then times that by the number of lines you've written. I'll show you an example now. So you should be able to see on the screen a letter, and that's an IELTS General Training Writing Task 1 letter. I quickly counted the words in 3 random lines, and there were between 8 and 12 words per line. So I took an average of 10, and I counted 13 lines, and so know that there's around 130 words. And I know that if this was my answer, I would need to write more to meet the 150 word minimum. So that's a much quicker way of knowing how many words you've written without spending time counting every word. So just to recap, if you've just joined us, I'm giving tips on how to manage your time in the IELTS writing test. And I've given 3 tips so far. The first tip was have a plan before you start the test. The second tip was start with the writing task that's easiest for you. And the third tip was don't spend time counting every word. There are quicker ways to estimate how many words you have written. The fourth tip is don't erase whole sentences or paragraphs. If you've written a sentence or if you've written a paragraph and you're not happy with it, and you're writing in pencil, you may want to erase it and start again. And this can use up a lot of time. And in my experience of watching IELTS candidates do the writing test, and over the years I've watched hundreds and hundreds of candidates do writing tests. People who write in pencil and use an eraser, rub out a lot of sentences or sometimes a whole paragraph, often don't write enough. They don't finish their writing in time. So my suggestion is, if you write a sentence or a paragraph and you're not happy with it and you want to try again, is try again underneath before you rub it out. And then if you're happier with the second time you've written it, just cross out your first attempt so the examiner knows which part they should read. This can save time if, for example, if you write a sentence and you rub it out and you try again and you're still not happy with it and you preferred the first version, you've then got to write that first version again. But if you don't rub it out and you try again and are not happy with it, you can cross out the second version and keep the first version. And in a 1-hour test, this can save a lot of time. Writing in pen kind of forces you to do this as well. So that's something to think about, because you have a choice whether to write in pencil or pen in the IELTS writing test. My last tip about managing your time in the IELTS writing test is to know exactly what you want to check your writing for when you've finished. And if you follow some of the tips I've given already today, you should be left with some time at the end to check your writing. And some of the things you might want to check for are spelling mistakes that you know you often make. Some of the most common spelling mistakes in IELTS writing are words like government, environment, different, percentage. But you may know other words that you often misspell. I'm going to ask SJ to put some links in the comment section to some blog posts on common mistakes in IELTS writing. Maybe you make some of those mistakes, and maybe those are mistakes you should check for in your writing. So yeah, check out those links later. So those are the 5 tips that I'd like to give you today around managing your time in the the IELTS writing test. We'll move on to IELTS speaking shortly, but I think now would be a good time to see if there are any questions that I could answer on that.
Yep. Hi. We've picked up 3 particular questions. Denisa asks, do I give my opinion in the problem-solving essay?
Okay, is it Denisa?
Yes, Denisa.
So hi, Denisa. So a problem-solving essay, I'm thinking you mean where the topic or the task is to say what the problem is related to a particular topic, and then give your opinions about what the solution may be. So I guess all of your content in a way is your opinion, because you are explaining what you think the problem is from your point of view, and then if it asks you to give possible solutions, you are explaining what solutions you think might work. So it's very much all about your opinion, and that's one common type of IELTS writing task 2 question, where you might be asked to talk about a problem and then solutions. So in a way, it is all your opinion, the whole essay, but it's certainly a good idea to summarize that clearly in the conclusion to your essay.
Weka, I'm really sorry if I pronounced your name incorrectly. What to do if you get a topic in part 2 you don't know anything about? I think that's quite a common question. I mean, what if you don't know anything about what it is they're asking?
Yeah. So I think there are two ways to approach this. Going back to something I said earlier, it can help when you start the writing test to look at both tasks very quickly first. And if, for example, you look at writing task 2 and you think, I don't really have many ideas about this topic, it's a good idea to start with task 1. And at some level, while you're writing task 1, your brain is processing the task 2 topic subconsciously. And when you return to the task 2 topic, it's very likely that you actually find ideas come more easily. So that's one technique to use, and it can be quite effective. So looking at both tasks first, and then choosing the one that you're more confident with before returning to the other one. The other, if it's task 2 that we're talking about, because that's the essay where you have to bring your ideas to the topic. One way of generating ideas is to think about the topic from different angles or different perspectives. So you could, for example, think about the topic from an environmental perspective, or an economic perspective, or you could think about it from the perspective of young people or older people. And this is one way that can help you come up with ideas rather than just looking at a topic and having a blank mind. So
could you give an example of a question? So say if the topic is tourism, for example, what if you haven't got don't know very much about tourism. What kind of, if the question is, what are the benefits of living in a city with plenty of tourism, and you don't know anything about that, is it okay to say, well, I don't know much about it because I live in a place where there is very little tourism?
No, that's not an option you have in the essay. I think all of the topics of the essays are designed to be are designed so that almost everybody can relate to them in some way.
Okay.
And if we're talking about tourism, you might not work in tourism, but in most cities of the world, you're going to have tourists visit. You may have been a tourist. If you don't live in a city, I'm sure within your country, tourists visit, or you may have watched travel programs on television. So I don't think there are any topics where you have no experience of at all. They are going to be topics that you can relate to in some way. The difficulty is doing it in the pressure of the test. If it's not a topic you've kind of prepared specifically for, and that's where it can be very useful to have ways of thinking. And one way of thinking is to look at the topic from different angles. So an environmental perspective, an economic perspective.
I have a question from Thuya Ag. Again, apologies if I mispronounced your name. How do I move a score from a band 6 to a 7 or 7.5?
And I'm assuming it's about writing.
Yes.
Yes. So, well, there's a number of ways. I mean, the writing, there's 4 different writing criteria. One is related to the content of what you're writing. The next one is related to how you organize and link your ideas together. And then the next one is the vocabulary, the words that you use. And the last one is the grammar that you use. So how much grammar you use and how, whether you use different types of complex grammar and whether you make many mistakes or not. So so for this particular student, I mean, it might be one of those is more important for the student to focus on than others. It might be that the student's grammar is a weak point. Maybe the student makes a lot of grammar mistakes. And so for that student, it's about knowing what those mistakes are, being able to notice those mistakes and correct them. For another student, it might be that they don't use enough vocabulary, or that they don't write in paragraphs. So my advice is to, I guess, look at what the criteria is for a band score 7. Think about your own writing and what are your strengths and weaknesses as a writer, and then focus on the areas that you need to improve.
Okay. I hope that helps answer your question, Thuya. I have one more question, which is, how much importance is given for vocabulary and using different words for different situations and sequences?
And sequences?
I think that is what you said, yeah.
Okay. So using I mean, vocabulary is one of the 4 criteria. So it's 25% of the writing score. So it's equally important to grammar and organization and linking and the information or content in your writing and whether you've answered the question or not. If I can't see the question, but if the student wrote sequences, they probably mean linking words like firstly, secondly, and, but, also. And these are part of the organization and linking criteria. So together with organization and paragraphs, they are also worth 25%.
Okay. I have another question from Devani.
Hello, Devani.
Is it necessary to write uppercase or lowercase or in capitals? I'm not sure what that says. In reading. Oh.
Well, I'll answer that question for reading because it's quite quick, but for writing also, because we're talking about writing. So in the IELTS reading test, when you put your answers on the answer sheet, they can be in capitals or lowercase. It's not important. What's important is it's clear. In your writing, if your handwriting is difficult to read, it may be a good idea for you to write.
Oh, I think Pete has frozen. Hang on. We seem to have lost Pete temporarily. I'm just checking to see where he is. Please bear with us because he's in New Zealand, so I can't just go next door and say hi. If you've just joined us, I'm here with Pete Jones, who unfortunately is frozen. So we've temporarily lost contact with him. Hang on a second. Oh dear, oh dear. I'm trying to get him back. But in the meantime, if you've just joined us, we are doing an IELTS Facebook Live on how to manage your time in the IELTS writing and speaking tests. So far, we've been getting lots of questions and lots of comments. They're coming in thick and fast, and we can't answer them all in this one session, but we'll answer as many questions as we can. He's just done a session on how to manage your time in the writing test and giving tips on how to do that. And we're currently answering questions on writing. Okay, I just got a message from Pete. He's unfortunately his laptop has let him down, so he's just restarting and he'll be joining us shortly. If you've missed any of what's gone before, don't worry. When we finish with this session, it will be on our Facebook page, so you'll be able to see the whole thing from the beginning again. We are taking note of all the questions that you've asked, and when we get to the end of the next session, which is going to, well, when Pete comes back, the next session is going to be about how to manage your time in the speaking test. So if you have any concerns or worries about how to manage your time within the speaking test, then do post them up, and we will get to them as quickly as we can. Oh, yes, and I've got another message saying that he will also answer any questions that he can't answer right now after we've done the session. So in the meantime, do keep posting your questions and letting us know which questions you would like us to answer. As I said, we are getting quite a lot of questions, so we won't be able to answer every single one of them, but we will answer as many as we can. And also at the end of the session, Pete will come back onto the page and he'll try and answer as many as he can then. I can see that there's a lot of you coming in from all over the world. And I'm afraid I can't actually answer all those questions because I'm not the IELTS expert. I just facilitate the sessions as much as we can. I'm based in the UK and I work for the IELTS Facebook team, but I'm not an IELTS expert. Pete, on the other hand, is. And when he comes back, we will definitely carry on. We'll answer another question on writing, but then after that, we're going to go on to tips for speaking. So I'm just checking my producer who is off the other side of the screen to see where we're at and to see where Pete might be.
He should be back in a few minutes.
He should be back in a few minutes, hopefully. So I'm going to put you on. Nope, I can't put you on hold. I can see that we've got a lot of questions. They're very, very good questions. If you've just joined us, this is a session on how to manage your time in the IELTS writing and speaking tests with Pete Jones, who is an IELTS specialist. Now, unfortunately, we've lost Pete temporarily for technical reasons, but he will be getting back to us very soon. Oh, in the meantime, I've got a message from my producer. If you're interested, if you have any ideas for any future sessions or topics, do put them on our Facebook page and write them in the comments and let us know what topics you'd like us to cover. It doesn't have to be specific to the test, but for example, if it's studying tips, for example, how to prepare for exams in general, we can consider that as well. But we're welcome to any ideas or thoughts on any future sessions that you think that we could run. We do have other IELTS specialists as well, who have their own specialties and their own thing that they are specialists in and quite experts in. So we can tap into a range of other people as well. But we think, if you do let us know what other topics you'd like us to cover. As I said, it doesn't have to be very specifically to the IELTS test itself. But for example, this session is about how to manage your time within an exam. And these tips can be used in whatever tests or exams that you could be taking. I'm just checking now messages to see where Pete might be. He's almost there. So hopefully we'll be back online very, very soon. If you've missed any of the session that's gone before, this whole Facebook Live session is being recorded and you will be able to see it on our Facebook page when we're finished. I'm getting a message. Someone has suggested a topic and how to manage the test day, how to manage on the test day. And what do you think? Would you find this useful? That we do a session on how to manage the test day itself. Do let us know. Send us your feedback. Would you find it useful if we did a topic on how to manage test day itself? Are there any other topics that you'd like us to cover? Yeah, we'd be happy to talk about it. Any suggestions that you have would be welcome. If you want more tips, we're always posting tips on our Facebook page. And if you're not already following us please do follow us on Facebook, and you will be able to get all the other tips that we get from all our experts who write for us, because we don't just do video sessions, we also do tips on our wall as well. So while you're waiting, you could actually have a look along our wall and see all the various different tips that we give. So if you've just joined us, this is how to manage your time in the IELTS writing and speaking test. I'm really sorry, but our technical expert is offline at the moment, but he should be joining us very, very soon. Please bear with us. He is actually joining us from New Zealand, and I'm in the UK. So there is a little bit of a time difference there. We did cover reading in our last session. And if you could have a look at our wall previously, you'll see that we've done a session with Pete with that too. And here is Pete. Hi, Pete.
Hi. Yeah, I'm back. Sorry about that.
What happened?
That's like technical problem this end. I'm not quite sure, but I think my laptop may have overheated. It's a really hot summer's night here in Auckland. So I've hunted around for a fan. So I've now got a fan in the room, and I'm hoping that's going to do the trick.
Okay. Well, I'm really glad you're back with us, because I was rambling on for quite a while. So I guess because we're kind of running low on time now, I think we'll move on to the speaking section of the test. So I mean, we've got loads of questions, which I'm sure that we will get to the questions later on writing. But now we're going to look at the speaking test and how to manage your time in the speaking test. So over to you.
Thank you, SJ. So yeah, I'd like to share some tips with you on how to manage your time in the IELTS speaking test. And for those of you new to IELTS who haven't taken a speaking test before, the speaking test contains 3 parts, is 11 to 14 minutes long. And it includes an examiner asking you, the candidate, some questions. In part 1, the examiner will ask you some questions on familiar topics like family, work, study, your hometown. In part 2, the examiner will give you a topic to talk about. They will give you 1 minute to think about that topic, and then ask you to talk about that topic for 1 to 2 minutes. And then in part 3, the examiner will ask you some more general, less personal questions about the topic that you talked about in part 2. And my first tip for managing your time in the IELTS speaking test is to learn and use some phrases for avoiding hesitation. So there are going to be times in your IELTS speaking test when you don't know what to say. It may be because the examiner asks you a difficult question. It may be because you can't think of the word that you want to use to explain your ideas. And it's really important to fill this time rather than just have silence. And so if you're asked a very difficult question, for example, you could say things like, "That's a difficult question. I haven't thought about that before. Let me think." These phrases buy you some thinking time and make your hesitation less obvious. So SJ can put a link to a blog post with some useful phrases for IELTS speaking for when you don't know what to say in the comments section. So you can check that a bit later. My second tip is particularly for part 2 of the speaking test, where you are given a topic and you have to talk about it for 1 to 2 minutes. So in the 1 minute thinking time that you have before you start speaking, it's really important that you choose a topic that you feel you can talk about for 2 minutes, because you want to show the examiner that you can keep talking and that you can develop your ideas. And in my experience, candidates who choose real examples, so examples from their own life, are able to give more information and keep talking more easily. And this is especially true if in that planning time they also think of a second example to talk about as a kind of insurance or safety net, so that if you run out of things to say and you still have more time to keep talking, you have a second idea, a second example you can include. In the example that we're going to put on the screen now, you could, in the 1 minute preparation time, it's important to think of an example that you can talk about for 2 minutes. So you might think about a time when you went out with your friends to the beach, for example, or shopping. And it would be a good idea to think of a second time that you went out with your friends that you could talk about if you needed to. And all you would need to do is, when you finish talking about the first topic, you could say, another time I went out with my friends for the day was last week. And then you could talk about the same points again, but for the second example. The next tip is also about IELTS Speaking Part 2, and it's also about what to do in that planning time, in the 1 minute preparation time you have. It's a really good idea to think about how you're going to introduce your topic. And SJ, if you could put that topic back on the screen, that would be great. If you introduce your topic, you might, or one way to introduce your topic is to say, I'm going to talk about a day that I went out with my friends. And if you do this kind of introduction, it has a few benefits. Number one, it uses up some of the 2 minutes. Number two, it gives you confidence to start speaking. And it also shows that you can use a different kind of grammar as well. So what I suggest is, during that 1 minute preparation time, is you actually write just that first sentence, the introductory sentence that you're going to say. This will give you confidence that you're going to be able to start speaking. Another thing you should write in your notes, so another way to use that 1 minute preparation time, is to notice what time the speaking topic is about. Is it about the past? Is it about the present? Or is it about the future? And to write that on your notes very, very clearly. So for this topic, I suggest writing past, P-A-S-T, at the top of your notes in capital letters. And the reason for this is, one of the most common mistakes in IELTS speaking is using the wrong type of grammar to describe past events. And if you have that reminder on your notes, it will give you a better chance of using the right grammar to talk about the past. And we've got a link that, again, SJ can share on the in the comments to common types of IELTS speaking part 2 task or part 2 topic. So you can practice different types of topic that you may get. My last tip for the evening, my last speaking tip, for managing your time in the IELTS speaking test is only correct the mistakes you know how to correct. If you make a mistake and you notice it and you know how to correct it, just correct it quickly and then keep talking. There's no need to apologize, and the less hesitation, the better. If you notice that you've made a mistake, but you don't know how to correct it, I would suggest just keep talking. If you try and correct it, you're probably going to hesitate. You may not get it right the second time, and it may make what you're saying more difficult to follow for the examiner. It's probably better just to keep talking. So, in other words, when you make a mistake, correct it quickly or not at all. So SJ or I can post some links again in the comments section to some common mistakes that candidates make in the IELTS speaking test, because maybe you make some of those mistakes, and it would be good if you notice them when you're speaking and know how to correct them so that you don't hesitate too much. So those are the tips for managing your time in the IELTS speaking test. Use phrases to avoid hesitation. Choose a topic for part 2 that you, a real example that you feel that you can talk for 2 minutes about, but also have a backup second example in case you need to keep talking for longer. Introduce your topic in part 2 and use the 1 minute preparation time to make a note of whether the part 2 topic is about the past, the present, or the future. And then only correct mistakes when you're speaking if you know how to correct them, so that you don't hesitate too much by trying to correct a mistake that you don't really know how to correct. So yeah, back to SJ and to see if you have any questions.
Okay. Well, thanks for that, Pete. That was quite insightful. We do have a load of questions, so
okay.
I am aware that we don't have a lot of time, so we've picked out a few. Denisa asks, is it true the examiner doesn't like the students to say, of course, when they answer?
I don't know why that would be true. I guess it depends on how you say it. If you could say it in a way that sounded a little bit rude, I suspect. But if you just say it to mean yes, in the same way that you might just say yes, then there's no problem with that.
I guess it's a different ways of saying of course, isn't it? I mean,
that's it. So I don't think the problem is with the word of course. The problem might be in how you say it, but that can also be true for the word yes.
Yes.
So it's not really the word, it's how you pronounce it, I guess.
Yeah, it's intonation as well, isn't it? And expression, as you say. You know, so if you were to ask me to answer a question and I start off with of course, or of course, it's it's how you start off, isn't it? And also if you say of course at the beginning of a sentence as opposed to of course in the middle of a sentence, it's completely different again.
Yeah, so that, I mean, if the examiner didn't like it, it would be because it sounded impolite, and that would be about pronunciation. So that the examiner would then, that would then affect the pronunciation part of the score.
Right. That's good to know. Archana would like to know the difference between hesitation for language and hesitation for content.
Well, that's a really, really good question, because the difference is important because it affects your score. So if the examiner thinks that when you hesitate, it is mostly because you don't know the right word or the right grammar to use, and you are looking, like thinking, what's the right word or the right grammar, this is a language-related hesitation. And if you have a lot of language-related hesitation, it means you won't be able to get a high score for your fluency, for your ability to keep talking. To get a high score, like, you know, to get band score 8 or 9, you need to not have a lot of language-related hesitation, but you can have content-related hesitation. And that's when you hesitate, not because you don't know the word or the grammar, but because you're thinking of the idea. And it's usually quite obvious for an examiner whether a candidate is looking for a word or grammar, or whether they're thinking about an idea. And so that's the difference.
Okay, wow. I hope that helps you, Archana. Daniel would like to know if it would be wise to use time phrases in speaking. For example, time phrases? I'm not sure if that's correct. In speaking part 2, for example, idioms. I think what he means is just phrases, set phrases, if he's maybe to use up time.
What? Yeah, I'm not quite sure on the exact question. If it's about time phrases, time phrases are phrases that tell you what time you're talking about. So, for example, in the past, or last weekend.
I see.
And so those phrases are really useful because they help the listener follow your ideas. And this is part of how you organize and link your ideas. If the question is about idiomatic phrases, so idiomatic phrases are phrases that are very, like set phrases that are very natural to native speakers of English, or phrases that have a different meaning to the individual words when they're put together. That's certainly something you need to do to improve your IELTS speaking band score. And the examiner will notice that you're using those kinds of language, and this helps you improve your vocabulary score.
Okay. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. I mean, if SJ, if you just, can you put up that speaking part 2 topic again quickly?
Which is the day thing.
Yeah. So, for example, just maybe it will make my answer clearer. Answering that question, a time phrase would be, I'd like to tell you about a time when I went out with my friends for the day. It was last weekend. So the last weekend there is the time phrase. Or you might say, a couple of months ago I went somewhere. So that's a time phrase. But idiomatic language, an example of idiomatic language here might be, you might talk about a time when you hung out with your friends in a shopping mall. So hung out is the idiomatic language there, meaning to spend time relaxing with your friends.
I think that we did have a question on can we use idioms in the speaking section? I think the answer is yes.
I think you need to improve your band score.
Can you give some examples of some idioms?
Well, to hang out with friends is one. Just thinking about this topic, a time when you spent a time when you went for a day out with friends. It's hard to think just
on the spot. Well, just put you on the spot there.
I've thought of an idiom just now. I was going to say it's hard to think off the top of my head.
Off the top of my head. So that's an idiom.
Off the top of my head is an idiom meaning like it's hard to think right now without any preparation time. So those kinds of idioms are going to help you improve your band score.
Putting you on the spot there is also an idiomatic phrase, is it not?
Yes, yeah. I just need to say hello to Carissa, who's watching. Hello, Carissa. I'm guessing you're in Korea right now. So thanks for tuning in.
Wow, excellent. Right. Okay. Here's a question from Awais. I apologize if I've got your name wrong. Please tell me, can we give long answers in all three speaking parts?
Well, long is that's difficult to define, right? Well, certainly in part 2, you should aim to speak for 2 minutes. So that's a long answer. That should be your target, to be able to keep talking and develop your ideas for 2 minutes. In part 1, the examiner's asking you questions on everyday familiar topics, and while you want to develop your answers, you don't just want to give a yes or no answer. You want to give an answer and explain why, or give an answer and give an example. You don't just want to go on and on and on, because you might start repeating yourself or
deviating.
Yeah. So the test is part 1 and part 3. I guess the questions are designed to be questions that occur naturally in conversation. Mm-hmm. So it's about giving an answer that you would give if you were talking to a friend about this topic. You don't feel that you have to go on and on and on.
Okay.
And I know that on the official IELTS Facebook page, you have posted some videos of IELTS candidates answering some IELTS speaking questions. So those would be good videos to watch to get an idea of what kinds of answers you can give.
Okay. I think that's quite a thorough answer. Sujan asks, when we choose a topic, if we don't have any examples, should we say, I don't know about it, or I'm not sure?
Sorry, what's the first part of that question?
When we choose a topic, is this in writing or we don't know? When we choose a topic, if we don't have any examples, should we say, I don't know about it, or I am unsure? I think it's when we've got our topic.
Yeah, so maybe if it's about being given a topic, so if it's about being asked a question on a topic that you're not familiar with, you know, I think it's about buying yourself some thinking time. So you can use phrases like, you know, that's a difficult question, or I haven't thought about that before. But you still need to try and give an answer. So you can't. Well, if you give up, then that's going to show the examiner that you can't talk about unfamiliar topics, and that will affect your score. You don't want to show the examiner that. You need to try and answer the questions. So it is about, you know, buying yourself some thinking time. So using the phrases I gave earlier. Another way of buying yourself some thinking time is to ask the examiner to repeat the question. Even if you understood it, you could ask the examiner to repeat it, and that gives you a few more seconds to think about what to say.
Okay. We have another question here from Archana, and it's our last speaking question.
Okay.
Actually, should we do two more? One. Okay. How do I show effective paraphrasing in speaking?
Well, paraphrasing is when you use well, it's two things. It's using different vocabulary to say the same thing. So maybe it's repeating the examiner's question in another way, using different words. But it's also about finding another way to say what you mean if you don't know the right word. So you may have an idea and you want to explain it, but you may be missing one word. And so paraphrasing there is finding another way to explain that one word. So,
for example, I can't think of a word for promotion. You know, so how would I know what the word is, but if I was trying to think of something to mean promotion, how would I paraphrase that? How would I talk around the topic, use different words?
So I guess it depends on exactly what you want to say. I mean, if the question is about, you know, if you're being asked questions about your job, the examiner might ask you, you know, what they might ask you, do you work or do you study? And if you say work, they might ask you, what job do you do? They might ask you, you know, what do you enjoy about your job? And I guess at that point, you might say, well, you might want to say, I've just got a promotion. And if you can't remember that word, you might say, you know, I've just been given a better job in my company. You might use your body a little bit. You might say, I've just moved up job. So there are different ways of doing it. But that's an important skill, because it turns something negative, you don't know the right word, into something positive. You can find another way to explain what you mean.
I've just been told that we only have a couple of minutes left.
Okay.
So one very important question. We've got loads and loads of questions about handwriting. So we're back to the writing part of the test.
Yeah.
But yeah, we get a lot of questions about handwriting. So have you any tips on how to improve it or how to do better?
Yeah. So I realized before when I got cut off there, I was in the middle of an answer about handwriting. So in the IELTS writing test, your handwriting isn't assessed. You don't get marks for your handwriting. As long as the examiner can read it, that's okay. But if you have particularly, if your handwriting is really difficult to read, it may be worth writing in all capital letters. That will make your writing clearer. So that might slow you down a little bit if you're not used to it. So you would need to do some practice before to get a bit quicker. But yeah, writing in all capital letters might make your writing clearer if you're worried about your handwriting being difficult to read. If you do write in the writing test, if you do write your answer in capital letters, you have to be very clear with your punctuation, with your full stops and commas, because if all of your writing is capital letters, it may not be clear where one sentence ends and the next sentence starts. So you have to make sure your full stops, or periods in American English, are very, very clear.
Okay. Very quickly, we've had a question and a few questions about American English versus British English. And I think that comes up quite often. What's that question about American?
Yeah, so I mean, because IELTS it's an international test. It's the international English language testing system. Both British and American spellings are acceptable. So you don't need to worry about that, as long as you spell it correctly one way, whether it's British or American. Some people say that you need to be consistent, that you should always use American or always use British, but it really doesn't affect your score, because both are acceptable. So it's for IELTS, it's not something you need to worry about.
So it's perfectly acceptable to use American phrases in the speaking test, for example.
Yep.
Yeah. So like rain check, for example, is quite an American thing.
Yeah, it's any, yeah, I mean, and the same as, if you've been learning English in New Zealand, where I am, and you use some Kiwi English in the speaking test, that's fine. Yep. And I mean, there isn't a New Zealand spelling. I mean, it's either British or American. So with spelling, it's, yeah, British or American, and both are okay.
And also with some words, there are some British words that Americans don't use, and also in New Zealand. So things like pavement and sidewalk, and so it doesn't really matter so long as it means the same thing.
Yes, that's right. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. All right. So we've come to the end of our session. Thank you very much for doing this presentation for us, Pete. And for those who still have questions, don't worry, we'll get to them as soon as we can. Well, we'd like you to share the video if you found it useful. And I've been told our next sessions are in January. So hopefully you'll be able to join us, all of you, again, and you found this session very useful. If you've missed any of it, Pete has been recorded and he's going to be on our Facebook page. And so you can go back and see this video all the way through again. It's been recorded. Pete, have you got any last words to say to our viewers before we go?
No, I mean, just if you've got your test coming up really soon, good luck. And I hope that some of the tips tonight will make a real a real difference for you. Yeah, and you can get the score you need or improve your score. Yeah, thank you for watching, and thank you for your questions, and thank you for sharing if you've done that or are going to do that.
Okay. Well, thanks very much again, and have a good night to you, and have a good day to the rest of you if it's still daylight where you are. And we'll see you again soon, probably in January. If you're not following us on Facebook, do follow us. All the promotions and the announcements about when our next sessions are going to be are also going to be here. And of course, we've got plenty of tips that we post every day. So just keep an eye on our Facebook page. And have a good night, Pete. And see you again soon.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.